How's everybody doing? I'm Jay Elson, and this is Coyote Corner. The history between South Dakota and North Dakota football is rich, but a bit dusty. After meeting every year between 1946 and 2011, the two sides went their separate ways, with the Coyotes heading to the Valley and UND to the Big Sky. But as everyone knows, old rivalries die hard, and the schools eventually struck a well-received deal for a home-and-home series. The first of those games came Saturday in Grand Forks. Bob Nielsen hoping to help the Coyotes snap a 12-game losing streak at UND, which dated all the way back to 1985. Picking up second quarter, Fighting Hawks already up 7-6 when Keaton Studsrud hits Travis Toivonen for an 11-yard score, and North Dakota leads by 8. After struggling in the first quarter, the Coyote offense started to come alive. Chris Strevler to a wide-open Drew Potter down the seam. That goes for a 30-yard touchdown, and it's 14-13. Ensuing Fighting Hawks possession, Studsrud's pass off Toivonen's hands and right to Danny Rambo. First career INT for the sophomore. Yotes take over at the UND 25. 4 plays later, Strevler to Potter again, just 1 yard this time, but it gives South Dakota its first lead of the day. They get it back one more time before the half. Strevler takes a shot downfield and a free play, and check out the catch by Riley Donovan. Takes it away from the defender and goes 63 yards for another Coyote touchdown. Have another look at this one. Wow, 4 catches, 103 yards for Donovan on the day. South Dakota up 27-14 at the half. They'd add to that lead on their first possession of the third quarter. Trevor Bama up the middle. The senior carried 25 times for 95 yards and that touchdown, 34-14 Yotes. Fast forward to the fourth now. Here comes UND. Studsrud back shoulder to John Santiago. Got the foot down. It's a 7-yard touchdown, and it cuts the deficit to 10. After a field goal made it 34-27, the Fighting Hawks complete the comeback right here. Dion Harris picks off Strevler and walks into the end zone for the game-tying score. That was the second pick six of the game for UND. That one forced overtime, and after the Fighting Hawks took the lead on a Santiago touchdown run, South Dakota answers on its first play. Strevler to Shamar Jackson, his 4th touchdown in the last 2 games, and we would go to a second OT tied at 41. Coyotes got it first this time. Miles Bergner connects at a 37-yard field goal to put South Dakota back on top, but that meant North Dakota could win it with a touchdown, and that's exactly what they do. Studsrud punches it in from 1 yard out, and the Fighting Hawks come back to shock the Coyotes 47-44 in double overtime. A couple of things really hurt South Dakota's ability to close this one out. The 2 pick sixes certainly played a role, but so did their inability to get first downs. The Coyotes converted just twice in their last 8 attempts on third down.
Hopefully for the guys, sure let a fire up for me at least. These 2 weeks are going to be, we got to get practicing, got to just get going again and just come back. Youngstown, we just got to start fighting again.
We can either let this moment, kind of ruin us and ruin the whole season, or we can, use it as a vault to get us going, We still have plenty of goals, in front of us. It's still a long season. We just got to use this as motivation for conference play.
Well, as you probably heard there's no sugarcoating it. This one clearly hurt. And when we come back, Coyotes head coach Bob Nielsen will give us some insight as to what went wrong in Grand Forks.
Coyote Corner on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Dakota Land Honda, and your Core Trust Bank.
Well, it was a tough day in Grand Forks Saturday as the Coyotes again fall to North Dakota in double overtime. South Dakota head coach Bob Nielsen joins me now to give his perspective on that football game. And Bob, this is a sport, as you well know, that is filled with emotional highs and lows. Last week, of course, you guys rode one of those really fun highs. Unfortunately, this week, you were on the other side of that. So we'll get into the specifics as to how this all unfolded in a bit. But just first off, how tough are games like this to swallow?
They're tough. You talk about range of emotions that our football team has had from over the last 2 weeks, from an unbelievable high, coming back from almost an impossible deficit to really blowing a big lead and having multiple chances to put a game away. Our guys, have learned a couple of really valuable lessons here in the first 2 weeks, and obviously we've got to be better for them as we move down the road.
Now, your offense, we'll start here, is one that really seems to rely, obviously, on rhythm. And you had some trouble finding that early on, just 23 yards on 14 plays in the first quarter. What did you attribute that struggle to early on?
Well, North Dakota's defense, there's a reason why, they were the top rushing defense in the Big Sky last year and one of the top defensive teams in the country, really, in FCS football. They do multiple things, and I think more than anything, we had to kind of get a feel for what they were doing, because they had some specific things that they were doing against our formations. And I thought we made some good adjustments and found some ways to move the football pretty effectively in the second and third quarters.
Yeah, talk about that second quarter, because a very different story, quarter one to quarter two. How were you able to get things going? You had 216 yards in the second quarter, 157 through the air, ended up putting up 24 points to take a 13-point halftime lead.
Well, we got into rhythm. Offensively, we used tempo to our advantage there. The ability to balance run and pass was really important through that stretch, and we made a couple of big plays. The big play that Donovan made there right towards the end of the half was obviously a huge momentum play going into halftime.
Yeah, what a catch, by the way. Just took it away from the defender, and that gave you some momentum going into halftime, as you mentioned, but it also, knowing that you were going to have the football coming out, certainly increased that momentum that much more. And you did get the ball to start the second half. You put together a nice drive, converted a fourth down, extended that lead to 20 points. But after that rhythm that we talked about earlier kind of went away again. So just 2 first downs, I think, over the next 3 possessions after that. So what changed for you?
Well, it was a combination of things. Number one, we didn't execute very well on third downs. In third downs, we got ourselves off schedule. Once via penalty and once just by not by losing yards on second down. So when you're in an off-schedule situation, you become a little bit more one-dimensional as a football team, and that's not where you want to be against a good defense. The other thing is they held on to the football. They were able to make a couple of extended drives, and it's more difficult to stay in offensive rhythm when you're not on the field very much.
Yeah, the struggles on offense did allow UND to chip away. Credit to them for as you mentioned, hanging on to the football and putting those drives together themselves. They complete the comeback though with less than 4 minutes to play on the pick six. Can you walk us through what happened there?
Yeah, certainly Chris took it as hard as anybody there at the end. We had a 3rd and 4 or 5 situation, and unfortunately pick up a procedure penalty, which puts us into 3rd and off schedule. We decided to throw the football. I think we've got an opportunity to create a first down, which would give us the ability to maybe close the game out, and Chris read the coverage wrong. Read the coverage wrong, threw the ball into coverage. Their kid makes a great play, and the next thing you know, it's a tie game.
Yeah, 34-34 at that point. They go on, of course, to win it in double overtime. Tough way, obviously, to wrap up the non-conference season, Bob. But what's the most important thing? You mentioned some lessons that came out of this game. What are the most important things that you can take away from this experience?
Well, I think 2 things. Number one, obviously, we played a competitive football game against a good football team. A team that's going to win a lot of games this year, I think. At the same time, we've learned that, hey, once we have a lead, it's just like 2 weeks ago. When the other team had a lead, we kept battling, we kept fighting, we kept scratching, and we maybe got a little bit off of that mode there and got a little bit into, hey, we just need to not make a mistake so we can keep the lead. And so hopefully we can rally from that and learn from that and be better as we head into conference play.
Well, on an individual note, we saw another wide receiver this week deliver a big game for you. It was Riley Donovan's term. Shamar Jackson did it last week. Riley does it this week. He becomes the first Coyote wide receiver to record a 100-yard game since November of 2014. He finished with 4 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. That one beautiful touchdown. How good was that to see, just for Riley, given all that he's been through physically in the past year?
Well, really happy for him that he's worked so hard to get back from that injury that kept him out of the season last year, and he's a guy that has big play potential and a guy that I think will become a bigger part of our offense as we move forward.
Now, the bye week is on deck now. You open up Valley Place Saturday, October 1st at Youngstown State. Between now and then, what all would you like to accomplish, and what are the priorities for you?
Well, we've got to keep working on improvement. I think we saw some improvement defensively. We still can be a lot better. On the offensive side, we've got to keep working on finding ways to be better balanced in our attack. During that second half, we need to throw the football a little bit better and find ways to throw the football when they were really stacking up and taking away the run. And to finish out games, we're going to have to be better balanced and have more confidence in our ability to throw the football.
Coaches like bye weeks from a physical standpoint because it gives you guys that are maybe a little dinged up to a chance to heal. You did lose Ed Kennedy during the game on Saturday, the right guard. What's his situation going forward, and just overall the health of this team as you try to heal up and get ready for that game at Youngstown?
Well, we'll know a little bit more about Ed by midweek. We're hopeful that will be something that he can come back from relatively quickly. The other one I really feel bad about is John Wessels. John, who had just returned to play, recovering from a hand injury, which we had casted. Now, has another injury, and I think that one's probably a little bit more serious. We'll see, and hopefully it isn't, but could keep him out for a while.
All right, well, good to know, Bob. Thanks again for your time. I know this one's a little tougher to talk about, but we appreciate the time. We'll catch up with you real soon.
Thanks.
All right, well, now we've heard from the head coach. It's time to let our expert weigh in on Saturday's heartbreaker in Grand Forks. We'll cover Saturday's storylines with Andre Fields after this. All right, before we close the book on North Dakota, we want to take a closer look at the story behind that heartbreaking double overtime defeat. And here to help us with that, once again, Midco SN analyst Andre Fields. Andre, another week, another wild fourth quarter. Unfortunately, the Coyotes came out on the wrong side of this one. One of the biggest differences Saturday, conversions on third down. They were 57% against Weber State, but finished under 30% against UND. They weren't even that good in the fourth quarter when they were trying to close this thing out. If you're going to get that done, Andre, you have to move the sticks. And the Coyotes didn't do it.
Yeah, you got to move the sticks in order to keep the clock moving. You keep your defense off the field, but more importantly, you keep their offense off the field. And they weren't able to do that. It's one of the biggest stats that you look at to find out about offensive efficiency. And when you have a lead like they did at that particular time, it's when you need to be most efficient in order to close that thing out. Like you said, they couldn't get it done, and they allowed North Dakota to have the possessions to get back in the ball game.
Penalties certainly contributed to that. The Coyotes, in their first two games, just 9 penalties called against them. They had 9 on Saturday alone, and certainly in a couple of critical spots, including the play directly before the pick six that ended up tying the game. So that was certainly one more thing to pay attention to in regard to that. Well, turnovers have really hurt this team, especially those that result in defensive touchdowns. This week, of course, we're talking about those pick sixes. And those two plays, Andre, looked awfully similar. And so let me ask you this. Put your DB hat on. What did those guys see?
Well, what I think they saw was that they noticed by alignment something that they'd seen on film by USD, which brought the safety down into position. And from there, you could see that the safety was looking directly at Shrevler the whole time, who was staring down his wide receiver, and that allowed them to make that play. He never looked him off. He never moved him out of the spot. And, of course, the safety just made the play because the ball was basically coming right at him.
Yeah, with those two scores, USD's now allowed 4 defensive touchdowns the past 2 games. They've surrendered 52 points off of 8 turnovers so far this season. All right, well, there were a couple of very positive individual notes to come out of this game. First, as we mentioned earlier with Coach Nielsen, Riley Donovan delivers the first 100-yard game by a wide receiver since November of 2014. You put that together with Shamar Jackson's explosive effort against Weber State. We're seeing what these guys are capable of now, Andre. Now it's just a matter of putting that kind of effort out there consistently, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think we've seen some consistency. What we really want to see is how they start and finish, because in the middle of these last 2 games, at least, they've been very, very efficient, scoring quickly like we know they can, but they start off a little slow. They don't end as well. Now, granted, against Weber State, they were able to get in position to win the game by playing well offensively, but I think, like you said, we're starting to see the pieces come together. We see how explosive this can be. You put the defense with that, and of course Miles Bergner, and we should hopefully see some really strong things as we progress.
But particularly from the wide out spot, to see those guys going out there and making those kinds of plays, something that's been kind of absent from this team. Obviously, if you don't have a 100-yard effort from a wide receiver in a year plus, that says something. So to see a couple of guys back-to-back string together some performances like this, that's very encouraging.
Absolutely. Shamar Jackson, you know he has some confidence now after 2 big-time games. You can see that developing with Strevler. And then to get Donovan back on track. I mean, this is what we expected from him last year, but of course he missed due to injury. So now to see him back on track, back to form, you can't cover them both at the same time. Right. And that's going to be good for USD.
And there's other guys, too, that have that kind of playmaking ability. All right, well, finally, Miles Bergner has officially kicked his way into the Coyote record books. His 50-yard field goal in the second quarter was the 45th of his career. That moves him past Kurt Seibel for the most all-time at USD. Not a real surprise here, but good for Miles.
Absolutely not a surprise. This is exactly what we expect out of him, and we want him to keep going, obviously, for Coyote fans, because Miles Bergner has probably been one of the most effective and successful kickers in USD history, and he still has games left.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that number's going to go way, way up by the time he's all said and done. All right, good stuff, Andre. Thanks. We'll see you back here next week. All right, well, football led John Wessel to South Dakota, but it was his faith that took him on the trip of a lifetime. We'll share that story next. It has been a frustrating senior season for South Dakota linebacker John Wessel. The Sioux Falls native has spent most of it on the sidelines due to injury. But thanks to a very special off-season experience, he's viewing his situation with a very healthy perspective. Kelly Stewart has more.
Earlier this spring, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at USD was planning for a mission trip to Kenya. John Wessel has always been big in his faith and figured he would go to an FCA gathering just to support those that were going on the trip.
Brittany, actually, my girlfriend, told me about it, and I was like, well, we can go to the meeting, but I'm not going to Africa.
Well, it didn't take long for his views to change.
So we showed up to the meeting, and about 30 minutes later, I decided that I was going to Africa.
Fast forward a little bit, and the group of FCA members from a variety of universities was on their way to Eldoret, Kenya to share their love for God and sports, as well as help in whatever ways they could. Needless to say, the experience was eye-opening.
You see something that you just don't see here. You get to see how they live over there, how truly for each day they rely on God to provide their daily bread, to provide that meal for them each and every day. And we take that a lot of times for granted here because we know where our next meal is coming from. There they don't.
And despite Wessel's injuries that have kept him sidelined for a good portion of the 2016 season, his experience with the children at St. Jacob's Educational Center has helped him realize how much there is to be thankful for.
A lot of times here we can get sidetracked and we get blinded by a lot of things. We got this huge dome, these huge beautiful facilities that we just put in. Over there they got their family right next to them, and they got God, and that's all they need. And they have so much. Their heart is so full of love, so full of joy, and it was truly a joy and an honor to go over there and just to be with them and to absorb everything that they could teach us, because they could teach us so much more than we could teach them.
Even though the children weren't too familiar with the sport of American football, Wessel has been able to apply what he learned in Kenya to his life on and off the field.
They put their head down and they go to work at everything that they do, whether it's schoolwork, whether it's cleaning something up, whether it's mopping the floors, anything. Like, they put their head down and they go to work with it, and they put everything they have into it. And that's one thing I've been really trying to focus on here, is just each and every day, take it one day at a time, and whatever you're doing right at that second, focus on it and put everything that you have into it.
For a trip that was initially about teaching and helping children, in the end, it was the college kids that were the students.
Going into it, I was like, I'm excited to go over there and just help them, teach them some things, and it was the exact opposite. I got my mind blown away, and it was like, I can't teach these guys anything. Like, I just have to learn as much as I can from them while I'm here for the short time, because they have such a joy and such a great outlook on life and such a relationship with God that I just have to take that to heart and learn from them.
It was definitely a life-changing experience for John and the other athletes that made that trek to Kenya, and I think if you asked any one of them in the group, they'd tell you they'd love to go on another mission trip in the future, Jay.
Another great story. Thank you, Kelly. Well, the Coyote volleyball team was hoping to stay hot in Iowa City over the weekend. We'll get you caught up on them and some of the other fall sports teams at USD after this.
Coyote Corner on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Dakota Land Honda, and your Core Trust Bank.
And welcome back. The South Dakota volleyball team wrapped up the non-conference portion of its schedule at the Iowa Invitational over the weekend. Leanne Williamson's team opened that event with back-to-back wins over Lamar on Friday and Saturday, running their winning streak to 11 matches. South Dakota recorded 6 sweeps during that run and won 33 of the 38 total sets. It finally came to an end on Saturday night with a loss to the Hawkeyes, but the Coyotes finished the non-conference season with a record of 11-2. They'll open up Summit League play this Friday at Western Illinois. Also on Saturday, the women's cross-country team now 2 for 2 on the season. South Dakota placed 6 runners in the top 20 to take home the team title at the University of Nebraska's Woody Greeno Invitational. Megan Billington paced the Coyotes, who outran Nebraska, Kansas State, and Nebraska Omaha with a 4th place finish. Junior Bailey Ottle and Kiana Stewart finished 6th and 7th, respectively. Finally, the women's soccer team looked to get back into the win column Sunday against UMKC. Early second half, Coyotes down 1-0. Sammy Vilwalk gets the takeaway, and her cross finds the foot of Cooper Thau. First career goal for the sophomore ties it up at 1 apiece. It stayed that way until the 82nd minute. Reagan Childers dents the net off an assist from Sydney Young, and the Roos escape Vermilion with a 2-1 win. The Coyotes now winless in their last 9 games. They'll wrap up non-conference play this Sunday at Kansas State before kicking off the Summit League season September 30th at IUPUI. All right, that's going to do it for us for this week. For Kelly Stewart, I'm Jay Elson. We'll see you back here next Wednesday night for a special bye-week edition of Coyote Corner.